Raphael is one of the great Renaissance painters. Unfortunately, he passes by the age of 37 far too early. But he is going to be very influential moving forward, especially when we get to the 19th century. We'll get to that later. Raphael probably studied under his father, who is a ducal court painter under Federico de Montefeltro. And his father's name is Giovanni Santi, and you see some of his work here. Santi's work is mostly in a fairly medieval style. He's not aiming for the same sense of realism that we see from other Renaissance artists. Now, Raphael eventually developed an individual style that exemplified the High Renaissance in the minds of many scholars. But his growth is rather interesting. Here we see one of his earlier pieces, and by 1502, he starts to believe that he is, in fact, good enough to go to Florence and start studying. But Raphael moving from northern Italy, from Urbino and Montefeltro, down to Florence is sort of like someone moving from Madison or Whitewater to New York or LA. You might be a big man in that town, but the competition is a whole different level when you get to the major city, and that's what's going to happen. Between 1504 and 1508, he goes to Florence, and he starts to study the works of Leonardo and Michelangelo, looking at their drawings, looking at their paintings, anything he can lay his hands on. He does not study under the artists. I should point that out. He does not study their work. Instead, he's basically self-taught. Let me go back and show you this difference. In 1502, this is a Madonna and Child. And the facial features aren't quite right. They're too small. You can see where he's trying to go, but it doesn't quite work. Here we get something incredibly beautiful and naturalistic. But what Raphael is going to do is he's going to bring a sense of color to it that we haven't seen from the likes of Leonardo or others. By the time we get to closer to the end of his life, 1516, mind you, only 10 years or so later, you'll notice that he's become much darker. His work is almost Baroque, and it will lead a lot of artists down that road later on. Like I said, Raphael is incredibly influential. It's just a matter of finding that influence, especially when we get, again, to the 19th century.